It's been in the Hockey Hall of Fame, played by rock stars in their homes. It was the NHL's version of NBA Jam, where you flip in the air to take a massive slap shot. He's on fire? No, your shot is so hard, the net is on fire.
He's on fire!
This is the story of NHL 2-on-2 Open Ice Challenge. The 1990s were massive for sports video games. Hockey fans still talk about NHL 94, but at the top of the list was NBA Jam. Still one of the most revered sports video games ever. In its first year in arcades, NBA Jam generated over $1 billion in quarters. So what do you do when you see this kind of success? You take that formula of over-the-top, hilariously ridiculous gameplay mixed with great controls and impressive graphics for its time, and you apply it to as many sports as you can, including hockey. Midway, the company that created NBA Jam, did just that.
I got a call from our marketing director, Roger Sharp, who said, "Hey, Jack, would you be interested in working with the NHL?" And I had already done a 2-on-2 game called Hit the Ice again, which followed the arch rivals basketball formula. And Hit the Ice I created with Taito Japan, and that was very successful.
To get the deal done, Sharp had been working with Brian Jennings, the executive vice president of marketing for the NHL. He had also met with Ted Saskin, who at the time was the NHL Players Association's senior director of business affairs and licensing.
Brian said, "Yeah, whatever Ted agrees to, we'll agree to, but we can't do any agreements without Ted on board." So met with Ted and discussed what the opportunity was, what we wanted to do, and eventually we wound up securing the rights and the license, and they were both amenable. I think that with Ted, admittedly, it came down to financials, and that the NHL wasn't going to get anything more, better, or different than what the players are going to get. There was, I guess, some discussions going back and forth between the two.
Midway was a juggernaut at the time. Aside from NBA Jam, they created hit games like Mortal Kombat, WrestleMania the arcade game, and Rampage, which inspired a Hollywood movie starring The Rock. Midway knew all about making games that pushed the envelope. The trick was getting buy-in from the National Hockey League, which was much easier after the success of NBA Jam.
I think the fact that we were doing extreme over-the-top renditions of sports meant that there was some concern that this was not going to become a wrestling on ice so much as it was still going to be focused on some of the unique skills that emerge within the sport itself, amplified, if you will, in a more cartoonish, over-the-top way. So everything was submitted to both the league as well as to the Players Association, Ted specifically, and the ongoing development of the game, so that they put their approvals, being very sensitive to where professional hockey was at the time, with a great deal of fighting going on. They understood that we needed to do something that was going to amplify the experience for game players, but we were cautious in regard to what we wound up implementing. And as well, every step in the way, we were submitting content for approval. So with Jack and the team being so upfront, open, and honest, I think that we were able, again, to allay any of the concerns that we were not going to be as dedicated to presenting a positive experience, but again, an experience that was going to have some over-the-top physicality without there being any serious harm being done to the player.
Putting together the game presented challenges. For starters, motion capture in the early 90s wasn't as sophisticated as it is today.
Oh, yeah.
The Open Ice team turned to Mike Waldron, a Chicago native who played college hockey at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point and in the ECHL. He was also once in a commercial with Chris Chelios. He then played roller hockey, which is where he caught the attention of Midway.
I went down to play at this roller hockey game in a parking lot at the beach. And after the game, a guy came up to me and said, "Hey, I like the way you play. I'm thinking about doing a video game with guys rollerblading, and I think you might be a really good actor. And it pays $50 an hour." And I'm like, "Holy cow, $50 an hour? I'm in." And I said, "I'm Mike Waldron." He said, "I'm Jack Hagar. I don't know how I'm going to do this." And I said, $50 an hour, I'm all over this. I was only making $300 a game playing roller hockey. And so we played 1 or 2 games a week, and it was good money, but for a 27-year-old guy, single, I didn't have really any bills. But to make $50 an hour doing a video game, I was all over.
As far as actually the motion capture, as you'd call it, at that time we weren't doing full 3D motion capture. So we were still coming out of the early Mortal Kombat era of development, of filming live actors in a studio and pitting them against each other and so on. So that's how we were planning to do NHL Open Ice, was a video digitized game. And I looked at doing all the filming on an actual ice arena, which we had one right down the street on California Avenue. It's still there today, and it's a very nice rink and really convenient. But I just knew the cost of doing that and setting up cameras, lighting, etc., on the ice would be a major commitment and a major financial commitment to the project. So I just thought, well, I grew up playing hockey, and I had coached hockey for several years and was a goaltender and had practiced on what they call UHMW, which is plastic ice, and a lot of ice capade shows, or whenever they perform in a shopping mall or anything, a lot of times that's what they would use, is plastic ice. And I thought, okay, well, I know that exists. I know it works. What if I did that?
Yeah, so it's a synthetic ice, and this is back in '94, so it really wasn't as good as it is now. It's still kind of the same, but they used to have to we had to spray baby oil on it. So sometimes we had too much oil on it, and I would shoot the puck, and you'd spray oil everywhere. And you're like, now we got to clean all this up.
But then kind of falsely increase the physical effort that the player is making, so it looks like he's really skating full out. And we did that by strapping a bungee cord around the middle of the player, and it worked.
Yeah, I had the bungee cords. And I also had the harness where I did the flips. I forgot about that. I have pictures of me on the harness, and I think I also have pictures of the bungee cord. They wanted me to get a deeper knee bend so I looked real. Sometimes you can't get that because where I was skating was only 15, 20 feet. So it was really hard to get that speed up in that short amount of time. And then, the synthetic ice isn't ice. So you can't stop as quick. So there were plenty of times where I overshot the runway and I went flying. Yeah, I had to take my skates and get them sharpened all the time, because they would get dull so quick. And even the skates, I would take the skates in to get them sharpened at Gunzo's, which was the big hockey supplier to the Hawks at the time. And the bottom of the skates were taped yellow so they could fix it. And then everybody had questions. Why are these taped yellow? Why are these taped yellow? And they were getting sharpened every other day. Yeah, it was a lot.
So all we really needed, as in Mortal Kombat, were segments of animation. So all you would need is a player to go through one skating cycle, and then we could repeat that in the game. So he didn't have to skate 40 feet. He just had to skate say 8 to 10 feet and get that full cycle of a skate, full leg extension both ways. So he did that by having a bungee cord on his back so he could lean into his skating. So it was simulating a treadmill experience, even though it wasn't in a treadmill. And then you have to think about this setup. A static camera wouldn't work, because then a static camera, the perspective would change if you just had a static camera. So the camera had to be on a track as well. So we had a cameraman with a camera on a track, and he tracked simultaneously with the player. He had a little plastic rod that extended out in front of the camera, so the player always knew he was in line with the camera. And that's how our tests worked. And we said, this just might work. Now, the key to doing that is you have to have somebody who is ready, willing, and able to do this type of skating animation and acting like he's doing everything basically in place, acting like you're taking a tight left turn, a tight right turn, getting hit and flipping in the air, and so on and so forth. And we were fortunate enough to find that person in Chicago.
He made a uniform out of all kinds of crazy colors, purple, green, yellow, all kinds of colors. And then that image would go right into the computer and he could change it to any NHL team. So he was going to use my body for every NHL player. He cut off my head and stick the NHL player's head on my body, and he tried to figure it out. But filming that game went on for 3 weeks, every day. I think had to be 6 or 7 days a week. And we would start about 9 o'clock in the morning. I figured out I could last about 2 or 3 hours in the uniform, and then I needed a break. And it was pretty funny because I would get a break and I would still be in uniform. And they had a break room it was at Midway Games, and they had all kinds of video games. Big Game Hunter, Mortal Kombat. They had a racing game, Cruising USA, which that was my go-to. So when I would get a break, I would go into the break room in half my uniform, and I'd sit there and play Cruising USA. And then there would be other characters coming in from the other games. So Mortal Kombat was going on, and the other Mortal Kombat characters would come in their uniform and start playing games. And it was very unique. It was like being at a circus.
It was a grueling schedule for Waldron and the crew, but they powered through. Sometimes in what felt like 100-degree heat, 15-hour days. Waldron said throughout the filming process he must have lost 15 pounds just in sweat.
They had me come up with all kinds of different kind of trick shots. There's a pool shot that we came up with. So I'd flip my stick over and hit the puck like a pool stick. We didn't have the Michigan back then, so it would have been cool if I knew about that back then. We did all kinds of crazy stuff.
One of the craziest? Strapping him to a harness so he could flip in the air.
So they had this harness, and if you've never worn a harness before, it's difficult. All your body weight it's like riding a bike. That's where you're sitting, between your legs, and you're in full equipment, and you have no idea where your body's going. So I think I would jump, and then I would have guys around me help flip me, and they didn't know if it would work if I was flipping free fall or if they had to hold me. So they had to do it. So it was a really long process. That had to be at least a half a day doing that. So then we had to do that with me facing the camera, and then we had to flip me around, and they had to do it with my back to the camera, and then me going left to right, both ways, and then diagonally left to right, both ways, forward and backward, and then the other diagonal way. So it's, I don't know, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different times I did the same move. So every move we did in that screen was 8 times. And then it was never on the same take. It was always multiple takes. So it took quite a long time. And we had to write it all down. Did we do this? Did we not do this? And this was in the summertime. There was air conditioning in there.
Then came time for the graphics, the dressing, everything around the game. And that's where Josh Sway came in.
The inspiration for a lot of the look of Open Ice was a combination of, a little bit of NBA Jam, because NBA Jam had the formula down. So the flow of the game and everything, the flow of the user experience and everything it was kind of there. The template was there. So the overall UX design was set in place. There's a template, but what I wanted to do was kind of get a feeling of that you're watching sports on TV, the sports, motion graphics and such. But the other thing was also trying to convey the fun of watching a live hockey game in a stadium. And that was something that we felt like that we can differentiate a little bit away from NBA Jam. The NBA Jam was very TV presentation like, but for this, it's like, well, where can we have some more fun, goofy type of things in there? So we came up with all kinds of crazy things, but one of my proudest achievements in that regard is putting in silent movie footage in the scoreboards. And that was kind of inspired by going to live sports events, at the United Center and seeing on the big scoreboards little video vignettes, old movie footage that's related to what just happened. And I'm a big movie buff, so any way I can kind of sneak in little movie type of tidbits, and that I would do that. So I ended up finding this archival house and trying to dig up as much hockey related silent movie footage as I can. And when I exhausted those, then I ended up finding just anything that has to do with ice, so it'd be like figure skating and any type of ice skating that was just completely goofy in nature. And then it just went off the rails from there.
That's definitely like the most random part of the game, right? Like you score a goal and then all of a sudden someone gets hit by a cannonball or something like that. It's just like, I love it.
Yeah, exactly. No, we just thought the little vignettes would just be nice little, extra sauce to what's going on. It can just punctuate the moment. Every single frame is hand touched up. There's a reason why those sprites look so good. A lot of other companies of that era tried doing that, but they would always shortcut it because they would just videotape it and put it in the computer and that was it. But we as video artists would go in and touch up every single frame. We would find what frames we're going to use, touch it up, colorize it, redo all these things to make it look as colorful and pop out as much as possible. So it was a nightmare to work with. And if you look at WrestleMania, Open Ice, NBA Jam, all those games, you'll see that the colors pop. You compare it to a game like Pit Fighter from Atari, there's just no contest, in how great they look.
NBA Jam was famous for the amount of hidden characters it had, especially famous ones. NHL Open Ice has its fair share as well, mostly employees of the company, including those that worked on the game, often with hilarious expressions.
So one of my favorite things that I got to do in the game was to put the secret heads in the game. And so in Midway fashion, we would put anybody and anything into the games because we knew the players love these Easter eggs. They love just discovering new things. So obviously the team is put in there, and everyone else, all the Mortal Kombat team got into an NBA Jam. Everyone who was working at Midway, they wanted to be in the game, would put their heads in. So that was also one of my jobs because it was part of the user interface, was to put these heads in and get what we call mug shots. So when you're selecting the players, you have the mug shot of who you're selecting. And I don't know what the deal was, but I just decided I'm going to find the absolute worst pictures of each person and have that be their mug shots, and I didn't think anyone was going to get upset by it. They would, because they were in front of the camera, they were making stupid faces and doing crazy things and stuff. So I just figured, if they're doing that, that's what I'm going to put in. And most people were fine with it, but there were a couple of key people that were highly upset about it. I mean, just highly, highly upset. And at the time, I just didn't understand, like, why, what's the big deal? Why are you being so upset about it? We're all having fun and such. And now, 25 years later, or maybe, or even more years later, I realized, oh yeah, it's immortalized now. It's it's never going to change. And so now I feel the weight of it. And I was just, I was just a real punk kid at the time.
But there's one member of hockey's Mount Rushmore that you can unlock by entering G_H and the birthday March 31st.
Just before we were ready to launch the game at the show that year, and I believe it was in New Orleans, the show was in New Orleans, they said, hey, we can get Gordie Howe for the show to show up and say a few words and so on. And my initial idea was, because we've done this in the past, we would do kind of big over-the-top stage events. And I thought, well, I'll be there in my goalie equipment. Doesn't matter that it's me, but it was just, you could have a goalie on stage. And Gordie comes out, Gordie winds up, takes a slap shot, and we do a pyrotechnic behind the goalie or something. And Gordie's people got involved, namely Gordie's wife, I'm sure, but I don't blame her. She said, no, Gordie's not going to be firing any pucks on the stage. So he did show up as himself to thunderous applause by the audience and said a few words, and he became just our headliner for the launch of the game. And he was there at the show and signed autographs, was very generous with his time.
I hung out with Gordie Howe for a week, and then they were doing a wrestling game at the same time, so they brought in Bret the Hitman Hart. So I was hanging out at the video game booth with Bret the Hitman Hart and Gordie Howe all week. And then that uniform that I was in a Blackhawk uniform with rollerblades on. And I would go up on stage and skate around every couple hours. They would do a show.
Hager would attempt to bring back the celebrity concept in 1999, but the idea never got off the ground. There was one other Chicago hockey celebrity in the game, and that's the longtime voice of the Blackhawks, Pat Foley, who lent his talents to the game.
He would have plenty of witticisms and funny ways of saying things. You know, he's back on his feet, but with spaghetti legs, you know, and things like that. And Pat could come up with all those sorts of things.
Over to Bradley. He scored! He opened up the pearly gate.
And I just gave Pat a call. And again, this was still somewhat new. EA was, you know, putting out games for the home. But as far as an arcade game, a Chicago company, I think Pat was intrigued that we were local and that we did have a major Chicago connection. And he did every name that we asked him to, even lots of top secret players as well.
Upon release into arcades, NHL Open Ice wasn't nearly the financial success that NBA Jam was, but did earn good reviews for its fun gameplay and right amount of hilarious hijinks. It faced challenges during its PlayStation release a year later, with the company having purchased Atari in the same time frame, which saw NHL Open Ice compete directly in the console space with Wayne Gretzky 3D Hockey, though 99 does appear in the Open Ice game. Today, in an era of re-releases and games being available on new platforms, NHL 2-on-2 Open Ice Challenge remains a relic of the 90s. But despite all that, the game still enjoys a cult following, who will go to great lengths to enjoy the game in its purest form.
10 years ago or so, I started getting into the arcade restoration scene, you know, where I was realizing that a lot of guys collect these cabinets, restore these cabinets, and sort of keep them alive. And, you know, it became like a new obsession, essentially. And NHL Open Ice was one of the first games I hunted down. I found my first one on eBay, and it was in like untouched condition. Hadn't really been circulated much, and everything original was intact, you know. So that was one of the first games I picked up, and then that snowballed into a whole hobby of other games, mostly Midway games who made NHL Open Ice. It's a niche hobby, so, you know, finding guys that actually have these cabinets, it's just, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Cosmetic half of restoring the cabinet, if your cabinet doesn't have side art, you gotta basically go find someone who's reproducing it, or find original unapplied side art if you can. And again, that's a whole hunt in its own. And then as far as the technical side, all these games use old school CRT monitors, you know, so repairing those is sort of becoming a lost art, because the guys that used to run TV repair shops that know all the information about these monitors, they're just sort of disappearing over time, you know. So it's a lot of reading, a lot of tinkering, a lot of, you know, talking to other enthusiasts and just learning as you go, because it's all essentially a mystery until you figure it out.
Still, despite all the other commercially successful games the company created in that era, NHL Open Ice still has a special place in the hearts of fans and the creators alike.
My favorite memories of working on the game is just given the freedom to do kind of whatever I wanted to be quite honest with it. Jack had a lot of trust in me, and he would just let me, you know, run off with ideas. One of the fun things that we were able to do was to do things like with the interface when you have the goalies' helmets, you know, crash in the middle, you know, for the introduction, you know, being able to just craft that. And instead of making in 3D, I got the actual, you know, masks and, you know, got to videotape them and just do a lot of fun work with those.
For me, the appeal was simplicity. You have two guys on the ice plus a goalie. It's super high paced action. There's not really a whole lot of rules, you know? And that sort of appealed to me, similar to how NBA Jam was set up, was that it was like, you know, it wasn't a true to life simulation. It was just a kind of go for it in a couple minutes time and have a blast doing it.